Let's get to the nation's capital now, which is where we find our national political editor, Michael Packey, who I'm delighted to say is on the line, although still in lockdown. This was meant to be a short, sharp lockdown. What happened, Michael?
Oh, well, it's going to go on for at least another week from what I understand. So we're in lockdown in the ACT, and we have been in lockdown in the ACT for nearly a month. There's on average about, 15 to 20 cases a day. Most of these cases in the ACT, they're able to trace back. I think they've got about 10 people in hospital and one person on a ventilator. But compared to what's going on in New South Wales and Victoria, it's okay here in the ACT, but, you would expect that the lockdown is lifted next week, or restrictions are, eased quite substantially of next week. I just don't think that, Canberra can continue going down this path of this really harsh lockdown for about 15 or 20 cases a day. I understand that they want to get on top of things, and I think that they are. But businesses, are struggling around here. You can see it. There's so many places that are just closed. I know it's just as bad, if not worse, in New South Wales and Victoria. But, for a population of about 400,000 people in Canberra, I just think it's ridiculous. I think they do need to lift the lockdown after next week.
Time will tell, my friend. But you've got no parliament, or we've got no parliament for 5 weeks. Now, you and I might have a different view here. The PM went back to Sydney, which he's entitled to do. That is called returning home. When he returned home, and happened to be that other people within his family, i.e. his wife and kids, were also at home.
Yep.
He was then, because he's the Prime Minister, then off to Canberra again. And as he made the point earlier in the week, there are some things that he needs to be briefed in person. And this was a hanging offence on Monday. Suspiciously, Albo wasn't that critical of the PM. Richard Marles certainly let fly.
As did Bill Shorten.
But I have got absolutely no issue with this at all. He's not seen his kids for 7 weeks. Was 7 weeks and 1 day going to make such a bloody big difference? I mean, what the hell have we become, Michael?
Oh, look, I get what you're saying, and, I agree. The thing is this. He didn't break any rules. The Prime Minister did not break any rules. He went back to Sydney for the weekend to see his kids and family. He then got an exemption by the ACT government to be able to come back into Canberra so he could attend security briefings, as you say, face to face. And he's pretty much limited to staying at the lodge in Canberra or his place of work, which is Parliament House. So they're the only two buildings he's allowed to stay in, and he's got to get, I think, a COVID test every day as a result of the exemption. I suppose what it does, him going to Sydney for that Father's Day weekend, it was maybe a bit of a bad look, in the sense that there are people in lockdown in New South Wales, in Victoria, here in the ACT, that can't see their families because of various reasons. Then I suppose it happened at a time when you had those pictures at the New South Wales-Queensland border on Father's Day, when you had families basically hugging each other over an orange barrier. So I do think while the Prime Minister didn't do anything wrong, and while he's entitled to see his family, I do think it just wasn't a good look, given what other people have been going through for months on end. But in the end, as I say, he broke no rules. Whether it was a hanging offence, obviously not. I think people within Labor tried to make it a hanging offence and tried, to suggest that, the Prime Minister was being sinister and all the rest of it, when really, God. He actually, he ticked off on what he needed to tick off. What I did find particularly funny, though, is that, Albanese, pretty much backed him in and said that, the Prime Minister has got a right to see his family. But what was funny about all that? It was Albanese's office that was going around the press gallery that was briefing us on the PM's flights over the weekend. And, the level of hypocrisy and all of that sometimes really gets my goat. Is that, and if you noticed it, for a couple of days, Albanese really laid low.
He did.
And Albanese only really backed him in during an interview that he did in Cairns, I think on 4CA, which takes our program. He did an interview on 4CA in Cairns where he said, I have got no problem with the PM, going back to Sydney to see his family and obviously having to come to Canberra, for legitimate work reasons. But what's a bit rich is when you've got people from Albo's office going around the press gallery giving us the flight details. Clearly not, and as they were doing that, they weren't saying, they were just saying, you might want to look at this. These are this is what the PM's flight details are like. He left on Friday after National Cabinet, stayed in Sydney for the weekend and, and then made his way back to Canberra on Monday. You might want to have a bit of a look into it. Come on.
As I
Seriously?
said, mate, no, I'm with you 100%. But I haven't seen my my beautiful twin granddaughters, I reckon, for 12 weeks. But I don't sit here filthy on anyone who sees their grandkids. Or I haven't seen.
And I know what you mean.
I mean, when I say what have we become?
Yeah.
So the bloke is a prime minister. He doesn't get the the 6:20 from Central. He flies an Air Force plane as he should.
As he should.
He went home,
I've got no problems
which
with
he was
that.
able to do. He broke. Anyway, let's move on.
No, he broke no rules. He broke no rules.
Broke no rules.
Just that. No, he broke no rules.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is what it is. He's back
pain,
in Sydney, by the way.
Exactly. But how much pain and how much ill will do we have to wish on the one bloke? And at what point has he had enough? I just think, don't start me. Let's go to Pfizer. Here we go again. What do you make of this?
Look, I mean, I am a bit exasperated by this, and I'm really surprised, how, again, this took off. But it's something that you and I have been speaking about for a number of months, about how Labor has just been able to find these little chinks in the government's armour and really exploit them, even though these chinks in the government's armour are being exploited to a point where they're not quite true. And the context around these stories is completely missed because it's convenient and to miss the context of some of these stories. So essentially what's happened is this. During the week, the Labor Party applied for a freedom of information onto when the government first spoke to Pfizer. We all got given those documents during the week, and the documents showed that Pfizer made the first approach. It was in June, and they wanted to meet with senior government ministers to essentially talk about a vaccine supply deal. Instead of Greg Hunt, the health minister, meeting with Pfizer at the time, it was left up to health bureaucrats, and Greg Hunt joined the meetings in later weeks. Basically, the government's saying is it was right for the health bureaucrats to have the original meetings with Pfizer so they can sort out through any legal issues such as confidentiality agreements. Once those sorts of issues were sorted out, then, it would bump up or scale up. The meetings would scale up to government and ministerial levels. On the surface, I don't see what the problem is there. The other thing we've got to keep in mind is this. While, the government was talking to Pfizer about buying some of its vaccines, where the government really was spending its time was on AstraZeneca, and quite rightly, because AstraZeneca was the vaccine that was pretty much vaccinating most of the world. It vaccinated the UK, most of Europe, millions upon millions of people. And the important thing is that it could be produced in Australia. So it made sense last year that you would focus on buying a vaccine or the rights to a vaccine that could be produced on your home soil rather than buying the Pfizer vaccine or spending too much money buying the Pfizer vaccine, which was using mRNA technology, which had not been proved. No one knew if it would work. So it is, in hindsight, you could say, they should have ordered more Pfizer. They should have done this. They should have done that. But let's keep in mind, it's a pandemic. It's evolving. It's a situation that we haven't really dealt with before. So clearly there's going to be mistakes made along the way. The bottom line is Pfizer has already vaccinated 10 million Australians. AstraZeneca has vaccinated 10 million Australians, if not more. The bottom line is there's always going to be in these sorts of deals when things are happening so rapidly, Luke, there's always a chance that things may go wrong or could have been done better. But just simply, trying to bash the government up over this deal, I think is unfair, because if you ask me, at the time they were speaking to Pfizer, but they obviously were trying to do a deal with AstraZeneca because they could produce AstraZeneca on home soil.
And as it turns out, the Pfizer vaccine wears off faster than the AstraZeneca. So, I mean,
Yes.
this does not stand still, this pandemic. I mean, you go and make
No.
a statement one day and a week later look like a complete goose. If you've got the AstraZeneca, it's, from the research so far, it's less likely you'll need a booster shot as soon
And
as
it's
you
more
will
effective against Delta,
with
they're
Pfizer,
saying.
and it's more effective against Delta. Mm-hmm. And it's made here, and it's about a third the price.
Completely.
Hello?
So, I mean, this whole thing, then Labor coming out saying, if we ordered more Pfizer doses, the vaccine rollout wouldn't have been delayed. It's just crap.
Yeah.
It is complete and
agree.
utter crap.
Yeah.
The bottom line, we got the vaccines at the same time as New Zealand and Japan, and our rollout is, moving fairly fast and pretty much is on track as to where it would have always been.
Yeah.
So the pile-on just really gets up my goat, because
Me
so
too.
much of it is based on a lack of context around this issue.
It's very often lazy and partisan. I mean, the other part of the Japan story is they did meet early with Pfizer. They got their vaccines a week before us.
That's right. That's
A
right.
bit of context. What about Daniel Andrews? Geez, didn't he go on?
That was just ridiculous. So Daniel Andrews does a press conference, and of course, this is all part of this concerted effort by Labor premiers to bash up the government and bash up Morrison in the lead up to a federal election. To me, it's becoming very obvious that the Labor states are really colluding with each other on
Indeed.
these sorts of issues. It's becoming blatant.
Yep.
So you had Daniel Andrews during the week saying, if we got more Pfizer vaccines, we would have had, the whole state vaccinated by March. It's an absolute lie. It's an absolute lie. The bottom line is, no country in the world was fully vaccinated, or at least 80% vaccinated, by March of this year. So he went and made this grand statement, to the people of Victoria, which was wrong. The bottom line is, when it comes to vaccinations, you had Singapore fully vaccinating, or 80% of the Singapore population being vaccinated by August 30, so a couple of weeks ago. And I think it was only this week, that the UK managed to vaccinate or fully vaccinate about 80% of its population. So I don't really know what planet people like Daniel Andrews are coming from, and, where they can say, if we had more Pfizer doses, we would have been vaccinated by March, when no country in the world was vaccinated by that date.
I love it when you get fired up.
It's just ridiculous, though.
It is, mate.
It's ridiculous, though.
It's music to my ears. I hear and watch everything through the week, and I think to myself, my God, how has this become an issue? But it does. There are the Five Eyes. I've mentioned them before, and they are Wayne Swan, Albo, Daniel Andrews, Ms. Palachuk, and McGowan in the West.
And don't forget about Kevin Rudd.
And Kevin's in the background, of course.
It is so blatant. It is so obvious what they're all doing. And the other thing I find amazing is that you then got people like McGowan in the West and Palaszczuk in Queensland. Both of these Labor states have astronomically low vaccination rates. Because, essentially both these states are COVID-free, right? So why don't they do a little bit of work to try and get their population and their citizens vaccinated? Because they are going to be dealing with Delta at some point down the track, instead of going around saying, we don't want to open up or lift our borders unless, 80 or 90% of the population is vaccinated.
Well, McGowan said 90, but don't forget, there's a very good chance that the good burgers of Queensland and Western Australia, and we love our listeners there, I hasten to add, but they'll be watching international tourists fly into Sydney and Melbourne and be going, huh?
Yep.
Why
I
aren't
think
they
that
coming
that's
here?
right.
We were kept everyone safe. Why aren't you coming here? Because
I think that that's right. I think that that's right. I think that when Victoria and New South Wales and even the other states reach their targets of 70 and 80% and they do start opening up and they do start to travel, like, the ridiculous situation of, being in New South Wales and being able to travel to another country, but not within your own country.
Yeah.
So you can't go to Western Australia or Queensland, but you can go to London. The other thing that I thought was funny on Friday, when McGowan is saying that even if you're fully vaccinated, right?
Yeah.
That people from New South Wales and Victoria can't travel to Western Australia. So if you've got family in Western Australia and you thought you'd see them by Christmas, well, McGowan has said, oh, no, you can't do that, even if you're fully vaccinated, because you're still at risk of bringing in the virus. It is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous stuff.
We've got a couple of minutes left. I don't imagine, and I could be way off here, but I don't imagine the Christina Keneally idea is going to be all that well received. I don't know if Fowler, the seat of Fowler, would ever be at risk of falling, but it seems to me when you're a political party who, for noble reasons, wants to have a more diverse parliament, the idea that you deprive yourself of Thu Lee, I think is how I say her name.
Thu Lee. Yep.
The Vietnamese background Australian young woman lawyer for a political attack dog. I reckon that's such a bad look.
Oh, completely. So basically what's happened here is that the Labor Party in New South Wales has basically parachuted Christina Keneally into this seat of Fowler, which is in Sydney's southwest. Essentially, the seat of Fowler has been held by Chris Hayes for, I think, a couple of decades now. Chris Hayes is essentially resigning because of health reasons. You may remember, I think it was last year, he collapsed in Parliament while he was giving a speech and he had a heart condition. So he's just decided to give it away. And basically, they were going through the pre-selection process. Thu Lee, who's a 30-year-old Vietnamese lawyer, she's a Vietnamese background, has lived in that seat and region of Fowler in southwestern Sydney all her life, has got the backing of Chris Hayes, the outgoing candidate. Well, the Labor Party said, oh, no, we're not going to have you contesting the seat. It's a, safe Labor seat. Christina Keneally, what we'll do, we'll parachute you into it and you can contest it. So Christina Keneally currently lives on Sydney's Northern Beaches, which is, a fairly affluent part of town, moving to southwestern Sydney to represent the people of southwestern Sydney. She's not a local. You do wonder how she's going to go. I think that if she, look, when the election comes round, I'd say she'll hold on to the seat for Labor and she will move into the lower house. But I wouldn't be surprised, Luke, that seat of Fowler potentially could become a marginal Labor seat. It's currently a very safe one, but could become a marginal one because I would argue that even people in that area would not be happy at the way this has transpired.
Yeah, if you're a Labor independent and or a left-leaning independent and you want to have a crack, boy, I reckon there's someone's opened the door for you in that seat. Finally, mate, I know I said finally before.
That's right.
Gladys yesterday said no more 11 a.m. press conferences. And she did that at a time where the case numbers got above 1,500 and we've got fatalities, significant fatalities every day. I don't know that leadership looks like that. I mean, she started this. To his credit, not everyone loves Dan Andrews, but to his credit, he started and went to the end. I don't know what to make of it. What did you think?
Look, I thought it, again, a bad look. Given that, you've been telling the people of New South Wales that things are going to get worse over the coming weeks before they get better. So you would think that she would have still stuck out the 11 a.m. daily press conferences, probably, I think, until mid-October, until at least that 70% mark. I think that she should have waited until 70% of the New South Wales population was fully jabbed and the state started opening, and then maybe could have eased off on the press conferences. I think to have done it now is probably, it is bad. Now, she's saying that she'll continue doing some press conferences during the week. But, the bottom line is that when you've got, this many COVID cases and you're trying to steer the state and encourage people to get vaccinated, I think at this point in time, until you hit that 70% target of vaccination, at the very least, I think you should be continuing to do these presses.
Yeah.
It's your job.
Yeah,
it's your job.
Exactly. And she does have a health minister and a deputy premier that could have made the appearances. But
Completely.
I just don't like the idea that the fatalities end up on a press release. I think there's something appropriate about the leaders.
And which you can't question, because they're going to be video press releases from health officials, which are just going to be simply sent to all the newsrooms.
Yeah.
And you just flick, read the press release and, run the grabs.
Yeah. All right, mate. Great chat, as always. Talk to you in a week.
No problems.
There he is, Michael Packey.